Guys, this is episode 1 of GRIMM, which stands for Grave Retellings of Insidious Murders and Mysteries. Today we're talking about the Cheshire Home Invasions involving the Petit family. I'm Marina. I have my two best friends with me, Colby and Laura, and this is GRIMM.
I just feel like we are surrounded in this world by bullshit.
So how can you know what's real and what's not? Science versus. That's how. We answer questions like, does anti-aging skincare actually work? And what is your true personality type? And to answer these questions, we don't use opinions. We dive into the scientific studies, talk to the experts, and put it in a podcast that I know you are gonna love. Listen to Science Versus on Spotify.
Guys, this is it. We're doing it.
That song was a jam, though. Can we just talk about that for a second?
Good.
It was a jam.
It's so good.
Let's start out and say hello to our one listener.
Hi, Dad.
Hi, Mom.
Two. Oh no, we have three. We've got 3 downloads right out the bat. I got, yeah. So today, guys, we are talking about the Cheshire murders. This is Cheshire, Connecticut. Did we want to like introduce ourselves a little bit, or do we want to just jump into
Laura.
it?
I'm Colby.
Okay. Oh, we're just all right.
That's it. Well,
Stop trying to pawn off your
to know
episode.
us. Yeah,
Yeah.
you'll get to know us.
All right, fine. All right. So I'll just jump
She's just doing anything to not go into her
No,
presentation.
I'm ready. I'm ready. I'll just jump right into it. So I'm just going to give like a little quick overview just so that you guys have an understanding of what's going on. So this was a home invasion gone terribly wrong, as one of the perpetrators described it.
Or terribly right. From their perspective.
Oh, I was like, that is dark. That is
Some would
Is this
say
not
it's
called GRIMM?
It is. That is grim. I will get into some of their motives and all the bullshit lies that they went through. But so this happened in Cheshire, Connecticut, which is the bedding plant capital of Connecticut.
True story. It's one town over from where we all went to college.
It sure is, and most of us lived there for quite some time.
period of time.
But it is a super quiet town. It is described as a bedroom community, which I did not know what that was, but it is a residential area where a large number of people live but do not work. So I assume most of them work in like New Haven, Hartford, maybe even New York City.
Yep, I can see that.
It's a very quiet, affluent community. These statistics are not current for when the incident occurred, but between 2016 and 2020, the median household income was $122,477. So I mean that's pretty high. I mean,
pretty
people,
good.
That's pretty good.
people are well off. So this occurred on July 23rd, 2007, and the victims were Dr. William Bill Petit, who was 50 years old. He was the only survivor. Jennifer Hawke-Petit, who was the mother, she was 48 years old, and their 2 daughters, Hayley, who was 17, and Michaela, who was 11. And many people describe this as Cheshire's 9/11, just because it was so horrific that overnight people started installing alarm systems, panic buttons, panic rooms. Like it shook the nation. I mean, this was nationwide news. I remember being at a mock police academy when I saw this on TV, and it was like a really, really big deal. Especially in Connecticut.
Right before we moved to Connecticut
1
for
month,
school, right?
Yep, about a month before we moved to Connecticut. And I remember hearing about it and my parents being like, oh, like, where are you going to school? Is this an unsafe town? Like, what's the deal with it? And it was like, no, this is literally unheard of. This doesn't happen here.
It never happens. And it's one of those things like, it never happens until it does. But I mean, it never happens, and it's never happened since. But so as much as I hate I didn't want to start with the perpetrators, because I think that the victims deserve to have their story told more. But I think to give the background of them just helps highlight what shitheads they were and how they were so full of shit right from the start, right when this started. So the two perpetrators were Joshua Komisarjevsky, who was 26 at the time of the crime, and Steven Hayes, who was 44 at the time of the crimes. And if you look at their mugshots, like Joshua is like the younger, thin, tall guy, and Steven Hayes was like the squat, chunkier, bald guy. So it's like a bad pair of cartoon characters. So Joshua,
who's that? Pinky and the Brain. Right?
Oh God, yeah.
One is a genius and the other's insane. Can you pair off these guys? Is one Pinky and one the brain?
Actually, yes. Joshua Komisarjevsky was described by his former attorney as being a genius.
Okay.
There you go.
So nice connection.
Thanks.
So Josh was born in 1980. His mother was 16 when she had him, and she struggled over whether to keep him or not. Ooh. So after 2 weeks, she gave him up for adoption. Yikes. And he was adopted by Benjamin and Jude Komisarjevsky, who were devout evangelical Christians.
Also, much tougher last name.
Komisarjevsky.
It's difficult.
Yeah. He has like Russian royalty in his family. His grandmother was like a Russian ballerina or like with the stage. It was crazy. I didn't write all that down. I felt like that was very tangential, but
see, it came up.
Fun fact. Fun fact.
Trivia.
So Josh actually lived on North Brookvale Road, which anybody who's not familiar with Cheshire would have no idea where that is in relation to the Petit house, but it's actually less than 2 miles away, and it's actually very close, like as the crow flies. Like they're not far at all. So again, that's a pretty nice neighborhood still that he grew up in. So he had a sister, Naomi. And when Josh was about 4 years old in 1984, his family took in 2 foster children, a boy and a girl. The boy's name was Scott. He was 15, and he sexually abused Josh for about 3 years, which it started out with Scott making Josh pose naked for pictures, which they said it started out innocent, which I don't know how innocent like a 15-year-old with
naked
a 4-year-old is.
What years would this have been? Like how old were they again?
He was 4 and he was 15.
Oh God.
Scott was 15. Josh was 4. And then it escalated to full-scale anal intercourse, and he would burn Joshua with cigarettes.
That did escalate quickly.
So that occurred for about 3 years, and this was all going on while Josh was going to an evangelical church where they preached about sin and homosexuality and evil and demons. And so you have this 4-year-old boy who is being sexually assaulted by a guy, and he must be thinking I'm evil, this is homosexuality, I'm the devil,
and not understanding anything about it.
No.
Horrifying. Just feeling terrible.
Horrifying. So, in the early 90s, his sister accused Josh of sexually assaulting her. So it's sort of like give and get. And the father said that was probably true. So the family was notified after the 3 years of being sexually assaulted. The family ended up finding out that Scott was sexually assaulting the children. He also sexually assaulted the sister and the other foster sister. God. So they found that out, and then they found out that Josh had probably sexually assaulted his sister, and they did nothing and got no one mental health or any treatment at all. So, awesome. Yeah, that's helpful.
I see where this is leading. This is a recipe that you may follow if you were into making a murderer. These are like 1 part sexual assault receiver, 1 part sexual assault aggressor, and throw in a dash of not receiving treatment. I think we've got a murder.
Oh, I think also a tablespoon of a couple serious concussions as a child.
That will also do it, yes.
He had those as well.
Is that like the salt?
The
seasoning, yeah.
The seasoning.
Spice.
So, yeah, he had the concussions as well. So, he was having a hard time in public school. So his family decided it was because of the satanic influences of his youth. So they took him home and homeschooled him.
That'll help. Yep. Isolate him with the people who are abusing him. That's good.
Yeah, so he had a history of mental illness, including mood disorders, anxiety disorders, and alcoholism.
That's shocking.
In the summer of 92, his parents sent him to a Bible camp where the techniques included speaking in tongues, group humiliation, and guilt mechanisms, which...
So middle school?
Yeah, I haven't read the scientific articles on it, but I assume that group humiliation is very effective in treating the trauma caused by child sexual assault. I didn't print any out.
You
but
didn't cite that source.
yeah, I assume that that's a thing. And then, so this came out at his trial, but he had a biological aunt who also wrote in who said that he had a family history of Tourette's, bipolar disorder, OCD, and ADD. So
Yikes.
not good on the mental health front all the way around. So when Josh was 14, he burned down a vacant gas station. And so the arson's coming in there. He was arrested and brought to a small psychiatric facility against the wishes of his family.
If you're hearing page turning, that is one of page 15. I think 15 pages.
I've got a few notes.
Just a few. Buckle in.
I did some research.
Buckle in.
So he was diagnosed as depressed and suicidal. He wanted to try medication, but his family said, no. What we need is a sweet ass Christian retreat. So
With more group humiliation.
No.
You can humiliate me for that.
Josh's behavior could only be the result of one thing, and that is a demonic possession. So they did exorcisms.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Yep.
Total sense, right?
That it makes complete sense.
Yep.
Medication can't exercise you.
I have no idea why this occurred when they did that. I mean, like he was healed.
Mike, you can edit this part out. You may want to back out a little bit. I'm hearing your mouth saliva. Okay, thank you.
I did just want to say as a disclaimer, I am not saying that the Christian church or that religion cannot serve as a positive role model or, cause positive thoughts or healing in someone. But I am just saying when you have like a tough biological mental history and when you have a serious chemical imbalance in your brain, it's real tough to pray that away.
Well, it's the equivalent of going for a broken bone. It's just
it's not going to heal through prayer.
Exactly.
Yeah,
You can
try.
You can ask your friends and family to pray for like a speedy recovery and no complications, but you need to take
Pair
the
that
medication,
with-
like
exactly.
science.
Correct.
Yep.
So around the same time, 14, when he burnt.
I just imagine the alien guy. Aliens. You've never seen that meme?
No.
I think we found the first thing that we're going to put on our Instagram.
So when he was 14, he was using drugs and he started breaking into houses and he would sneak in at night through unlocked doors. So he was stealing money and electronics from upscale homes to feed his drug habit, which is
Cheshire still?
I believe most of his break-ins occurred in Cheshire. His drug of choice was crystal meth and cocaine. This guy is like super fucked up though, like right from the beginning. So he only burglarized homes at night when people were home. He used sophisticated equipment like night vision goggles and latex gloves. He would go room to room. This makes my skin crawl. He would go room to room and just watch people sleep and listen to them breathe.
Nope.
What?
No.
Yeah, you nope the fuck out of there. Like,
Yeah.
What? Yeah, so this is what he was doing when he was like 15, was just like breaking into people's homes and he was just watching them sleep. And I'll get into a little bit more later, but he also robbed a state trooper's house. So like what a little asshole.
And crazy.
The balls on him.
Yeah.
So he graduated high school despite
When did he have time?
his childhood.
Very busy.
And he actually, and then in
Not studying.
in
But that was late at
97,
night.
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah, he had his days were free. Yeah.
That's why he went at night.
Yeah.
Because he was in school.
Well, and people needed to be home so he could watch them sleep. In 97, he joined the Army Reserve and he appeared to do well in an 8-week boot camp. And then when he returned to Connecticut, he went back to burglarizing homes. So I mentioned that his former attorney described him as a genius, and he meant it. They said that he probably had like a photographic memory and that he could describe every single home he burglarized, what he took from them, including the denomination of the money that he took.
What?
Like,
What a skill to have and what a way to waste it.
I was going to say, what a waste.
I feel like criminals always waste their insane talents on crime. Like they could have just been really successful.
Use it for good.
In
And like a
something
little
else.
bit of evil, just small evil. Like
No. So then in 2002, he was arrested for, it was unclear, I think around 18 or 19 home invasions. I saw a couple places, said a couple different things, but I believe he was ultimately convicted of 12 and was sentenced to 9 years in prison. And that same year, in 2002, his daughter was born. Isn't that so wonderful that he recreated?
That girl's got the genetic deck stacked against her.
Yeah, so he was a model inmate in prison. And in 2007, the spring of 2007, which is around when he was released from prison, he actually gained full custody of his daughter because the mom was a drug addict and was in drug rehab.
Oh, lucky girl.
So I think the grandparents had to be involved because it wasn't clear whether he was out of prison at the time, but like you're not getting full custody as like a felon unless there's someone else there that's going to
I would think not.
Vouch for you, I guess. Yeah, I would hope not as well. But so in 2007, after serving about 5 years, he was released on parole in April. So there is a law in Connecticut that the prosecutors order the sentencing transcript and they send them to the parole board so that the parole board can read about the offender and the crime. And the DOC and parole board did not have this transcript when they released him. So on paper, Josh is this young, white, smart male who's only been incarcerated once.
And was a model prisoner.
Prisoner, genius, no mental health issues, and they let him go. They never identified him as a person with high mental health needs or a manipulator, and based on what he was charged with, he could have served 2 lifetimes, but he did not. Had they had the 2002 sentencing transcript, they would have had the part where the judge called him a calculated, cold-blooded predator because he wasn't just robbing homes for money. He was watching people sleep and invading their privacy like that. Like, that is not normal behavior.
No.
Though, you know what's interesting is I wonder, and I would say after the fact, now that this has occurred, I think that would be enough to keep someone from being released on parole. Because this crime shook up Connecticut's parole board and how they were reviewing cases. I wonder if he would have gotten released even if they had the transcript. Because they called him a calculated, cold-blooded predator, but, you know, almost so what? Like, they would have been like, okay, yeah, but he served 5 years. He was a model inmate. He's really smart. He's got his daughter. He's got his life ahead of him. I think they might have still let him go anyways.
Well, and that comes to the thing I have a hard time with, which is the point of serving in prison is to get the punishment for your crime. And hypothetically, when you come out of that, you're
reformed.
Yeah, and you're done. You've served your sentence. So at what point do you say, well, no, we're just going to keep you anyway?
Right.
You know, at what point have you served the proper punishment?
Right. So, I mean, maybe he should have served more than 5 years, but eventually he would have gotten out. But so there was a huge issue with the parole board and parole review that came after this case. But so he was this I did not know this previously, and it blew my mind. So when he was released, he was ordered to wear an ankle bracelet for 90 days. It was removed on July 19th. Within 72 hours, he was burglarizing homes in Cheshire at night, and within 96 hours, he was in the Pettit's home.
Oh, I just got chills.
I have
you
chills.
Said that.
I have chills too. It's just so.
It's just. I think it's because it's like with any of the ones that are like it would never happen in a place like this. You just think like, no, I'm going to start getting, because we're in a town very similar, literally town next door. And I just think like it could happen anywhere. Imagine you're just home recording a podcast. Maybe.
I think that's why the case was such a big deal, because they are all of us. Right. They did nothing wrong. They were randomly chosen. It's everyone's literal worst nightmare. Yeah. So it just But yep. So within 96 hours of having that ankle bracelet, and that ankle bracelet was to monitor him to make sure that he was home at night. Within 96 hours, he was in the Pettit's home. So he was a
manipulative genius.
Yes.
Clearly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. He was working with Steven Hayes, who no one has described as a manipulative genius.
He's pinky.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. So Steven Hayes also had a shitty childhood, which again, recipe for criminals. He was regularly physically abused by his father, and he was sexually abused by a babysitter at age 10, which I'm not saying it was consensual in any way, shape, or form, because the age difference is insane. But I read an article where he was like, she taught me so many things and I learned so many things. So like, it's still disgusting. It's absolutely still rape, but I'm just saying it's not, to me, like the sodomizing and getting burned by cigarettes just seems like a different situation.
It's like an added, yeah.
But at 10 years old, you can't consent. It's still rape.
No.
But
yeah.
Because of this physical abuse, he ended up with a fetish involving women's old sneakers. And he associated sneakers with arousal and would use old sneakers to get off.
Me too, bud. Me too. Yeah.
So yeah, I just thought that was a little fun fact. I had
Thanks
to throw
for
in
sharing
there.
that factoid.
Didn't know that one. Yeah.
I'm speechless.
Sneakers.
I was
Sneakers.
trying to think of something
Who would
witty,
have thunk it?
but
Bet you'll never look at sneakers the same way again.
So yeah.
So he also witnessed his father beating his mother and one of his brothers, and it's really fucked up. But if his dad thought, so he had two brothers, Brian and Matthew, and if his dad thought that Stephen or Matthew had done something bad, he would put the two boys in a room and force them to duke it out as to who would be the guilty party, and whoever admitted to it would suffer a severe beating at his hands. Imagine what that would do to your relationship with your siblings.
Yeah.
Pitting you against each other in the worst possible way.
Because I feel like you're probably getting the shit beat out of you in the room to not be the one admitting guilt. And then if you end up losing that, then you go get beaten by your father. Great.
And like severe beatings. I guess like his brother Matthew suffered a broken leg during one incident. Like severe beatings.
Yikes.
So by age 10, he was self-medicating with alcohol and marijuana, which like I can't say that I blame him based on that situation. And by 14, he was committing burglaries to support his drug habit, smoking marijuana daily, and was sent to a facility for troubled juveniles. Age 15, he was sent to a psych hospital. 1980, he got his first conviction before he graduated high school. And then between 1980 to May 2007, when he was released from prison, he was in and out of prison.
He was in prison for 27 years?
No. Between early 1980 and May 2007, he was in and out of prison.
Okay.
He had at least 26 occasions that he was in prison or charged by the time of the murder. So he was addicted to cocaine, and he was committing petty crimes to support his drug habit. So he didn't burglarize homes. He would burglarize cars, mostly in the daylight. He would go to public parks. He would watch people, get all their get what they want, their cell phone, whatever, go for a hike, and then he'd break into their car and take whatever was in their car.
So his aim was to make sure that the victim was not present. So total opposite of the other guy who wanted you to be there so he could watch you.
Correct, which is there was a big split as to who was the criminal mastermind behind this and who caused the escalation. And just from even the most basic information I have given you guys, I feel like you might have an opinion already.
I may have been able to formulate an opinion on this right now.
Calculated.
So he has a son and a daughter. His daughter was around 15 at the time of the crime. I didn't find much information on his son, but I just think it's important to know that these two assholes had children when they did what they did. Even though he had nonviolent offenses, his brothers said he was an absolute asshole. His brother Brian described him as manipulative, deceptive, and actually said he hoped someone would put a bullet in his head before trial. So no love lost between these family members.
No.
And his brother Matthew said if he wasn't on drugs at the time of the crime, flip the switch. So he also wished harm and death on him.
That kind of flipped. Okay.
Yeah, flip the switch. Yeah. Spoiler alert, they were on death row.
Okay. Got it.
But Matthew said when they were young, his brother Steven said, "Oh my gosh, you have to come feel this. The stove is so cold." And then held his hand on a hot burner.
Yikes.
So even though Steven had nonviolent crimes, if that's true, that's not a good indication.
Yep.
So his last conviction before Cheshire was October 1st, 2003. He was guilty of third-degree burglary and sentenced to 5 years in prison. He was released in June 2006 to Berman Treatment Center, which is where he met Joshua, his roommate.
Oh, gosh.
I was going to ask how the two of them met. They meet in prison. They met in a treatment center.
Correct. Okay. And he was transferred from Berman Treatment Center to another facility called the Silliman House, where Joshua was also his roommate.
Where do you know where those were in Connecticut?
I believe they're both in Hartford. Oh. And then Hayes was ultimately sent back to prison in November 2006 for a technical violation. He had a dirty urine. He did a podcast where he was absolutely adamant that he did not take any drugs and that the house set him up to send him back to prison. But I just can't imagine that that's true. I don't know. I'm going to call bullshit on that, because why would the treatment center set him up with a dirty urine? But he was paroled in May 2007, and he reconnected with Joshua at Cocaine Anonymous in Hartford. And they became fast friends, really bonding over their, prior relationship.
Love of burglary.
Yeah.
That's a hard word to say.
Burglary.
It's like regularly burglary. But
they both needed money. They both wanted to make money. They talked about, maybe starting a contract company together, because they were both doing some contracting work. But, mounting pressure to pay bills, buy a car. Steven wanted his own apartment. And he, with all that pressure, he relapsed at the end of June 2007. So he started doing drugs again. Apparently he went on insane cocaine binges in the weekends of July leading up to this crime. So Joshua, apparently he originally brought this up in 2006. Brought it up again. Hey, quick money. Let's burglarize some houses. It's my jam. I know how to do it. It's quick money.
And bonus, you get to watch people sleep.
Yeah. I'll show you how to do it.
Yep.
Now, Steven said, this is where there's a lot of versions of this event, because you had Steven who confessed. That's the word, confessed. Steven confessed, Joshua confessed. So you have those two versions, and then you sort of have what came out at their trial. So Steven said that in 2006, Joshua first broached the idea of, let's burglarize a home, tie people up, and then force one of them to go to a bank in the morning. Ugh. I don't believe that version of events. That's a very specific,
it's a very specific plan.
And I feel like that plan alone is already a home invasion gone wrong. There's no way to plan that out where that's going to go successfully for you. I don't see that happening. So I don't believe that. I believe it was more he said, you can burglarize homes. And Steve was like, nah, I'm not into that. Too many things can go wrong. So then after Steven relapsed, his mother was like, you got to get out of the house. I'm kicking you out. You have the weekend, and you've got to be gone Monday. So that's when Steven said, all right, let's talk about it. I'm going to be homeless. I'm running out of options. Can we do a home invasion? And he was like, you're serious? I'm serious. Let's do this.
Did we just become best friends?
Yes. Yes. These two jackasses. So prior to the Petit home, on July 21st, 2007. Oh yeah, they wanted to practice. So Josh wanted to show Steven how easy it was. So two other homes in Cheshire. They first home, only Josh went in, and he took cash and left a large carving knife on the table in the family room.
I really thought you were going to say left a large shit. really thought that's what you were going to say.
That would be diabolical. Yeah. What would be his name? The Wet Bandits? Would he be like the Stinky Stalker? Something crazy.
Good on
Stinky Stalker, yeah.
That's good.
Oh God, no! He left a large kitchen knife, a carving knife, on the table in the family room. Oh. Can you imagine, you don't know that somebody broke in, and you just go downstairs, and it's like, hey, babe, who left the giant kitchen knife on the table?
Imagine knowing that, and then hearing about the actual murders.
It's like, you guys know the Dane Cook skit where he's like, you just go in and you steal the batteries from the remote, and they're like, is that what they took? They took the batteries? You just invade someone's privacy, and they're just like, did they touch that shower curtain? Like, did they look at this? Like, is this missing? Where did I lost my keys? Did they take my keys?
Well, people broke into my house, right? The one we're sitting in recording this podcast, and they were in our bedroom. Like, they threw a broom on our bed. They dumped out all of my jewelry boxes. They took the pillowcase. They took like iPads. But the worst part was like I had to sleep in my bed the night it happened, and
just, like, completely
it just like it's so unnerving, and it just feels like dirty because somebody else was there,
and you don't know what they
not
did, and
watching me as I'm sleeping. I wasn't here for it, but like, can you imagine?
No, I cannot. So the second home they went into, they stole, again, it was just Josh that went in, but while he was in there, Steven got nervous and went in to get him. But they stole a cell phone, cash, credit cards, and a family photo.
Oh, see, that's like...
It's extra, like a trophy?
Again, yes, extra creepy. It has no street value. It's not like they're going to sell that for drugs. It's just him being like a fucking creep.
Ugh.
Yeah, don't like it. Do not like. Nope the fuck out of there.
Would I notice what someone stole out of my house is the real question. If it weren't like an iPad or something like that, would I notice? I don't know.
I'm thinking I wouldn't notice if like a picture went missing. That's kind of where I'm headed.
Yeah.
I'd notice probably like a month later or something. I'd be like, where did that photo go? What happened to it? I would never put two and two together that like the person who was in my home took it. Why do they want a picture of me?
Right.
Like, I mean, like I'm beautiful and everything, you know, but I don't think they're taking a picture of me.
I would steal a picture of you.
Thanks.
But like, how do people, like, I do hear this when people are like, yeah, they stole a family picture. They stole a vase. Like, do you really know?
I feel like some people who are like OCD cleaners have like a solid inventory in their mind of what's in their house because they move the object to clean.
That's fair.
So like if you have if you have like a dresser with like 5 photos and you dust it 3 times a week, you would notice if one of those photos was missing.
I see your point about noticing later then, because I wouldn't have noticed walking around. But yeah, okay. All right. I'm on board.
Guys, I'm not that person. I'll never notice. Ever.
So we can have her.
You can steal all my family photos and I will not notice. Not notice.
Noted.
Got some cute kids. I'm gonna take those photos.
So basically, Komisarjevsky just wanted to show Steven Hayes that it was easy. Look how easy we did it. We're good. Like, let's do this. So again, this is where the stories diverge the next day. Steven said the next day they were talking in the afternoon on the 22nd, and he says that Josh said to him, I've got the perfect house with a doctor and his wife and 2 kids. Like, get ready. Let's do this. But that doesn't really seem to be how the story played out. So I think the truth lies somewhere in the middle. I think they're both full of shit. But so the night of the home invasion, Steve texted Josh around 8:45 and said he was chomping at the bit to get started. So I think while they may not have had, however it played out, they knew that they were going to do a home invasion, I think, based on the correspondence between them. He said he needs a margarita, and then Josh did not respond. So he was like, are we still on? And Josh said, yeah. And Hayes said, soon. And Josh told him to hold his horses as he was putting his 5-year-old daughter to bed. Oof. Which, again, it still blows my mind how you can care for your child and then go do what you did.
Your daughter, too, right? And then...
Yeah, and then go do what you did. And Hayes said, dude, the horses want to get loose, LOL. So around 10 p.m.
Hold your horses.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. That's amazing. I'm like,
yeah.
Yep.
He had said, hold your horses. The horses want to get loose.
Okay.
Colby's mentally canvassing all the horse farms in Connecticut.
Basically.
They were going to burglarize a horse farm. That's a very unknown fact right there, is that they were
was the
going to
target.
burglarize a horse farm.
We're going to get hate comments on our first podcast. That's not true.
So around 10 p.m., they decided to meet up at the Stop and Shop in Cheshire, which is where I used to grocery shop.
Oh, I've been there a few times.
Yeah. So they said they got some drinks, talked about the money that they could make. And then they went and they canvassed the Petit home, went out for some more drinks. And then we're going to pause their story right there.
That was a Monday night, by the way. I was just looking it up.
Sunday night into Monday.
Yeah. Oh, so it was the morning of the 23rd.
Yeah. So they went into the home. It was 3 a.m. So it was 3 a.m. on the 23rd, but they were planning this on the 22nd. So the Petit family, I mentioned Dr. William Bill Petit. He was, what did I say he was? He was 50 years old at the time of the crime. So the Petit name is a very big name in Plainville. People know them. People knew his parents. He was an endocrinologist in Plainville, and he was also the medical director of the Joslin Diabetes Center at the Hospital of Central Connecticut. And his in-laws describe him, he was a very hard worker. He'd go into work at 7 a.m., come home at 9:30 p.m., just like really loved his job. And he has not practiced medicine since, so that's very sad. His wife, Jennifer Hawke-Petit, she was 48 at the time of the crime. She was the daughter of a United Methodist minister. She was the nurse and co-director of the health center at Cheshire Academy, which for anybody that doesn't know what that is, it's a very prestigious high school, pre-college. Prep school is the term in Cheshire. She began her career as a pediatric oncology nurse at Children's Hospital of Pittsburgh, which is where she met Bill.
Oh.
What kind of person would it take to be a pediatric oncology nurse? I mean, seriously. So that was in 1981. She met Bill. He was a third-year med student at Dartmouth. He was doing rotations, and he saw her, and she was blonde with big eyes, and he wanted to impress her as a know-it-all. So he went into the room, and he was like, "You're not taking the blood pressure correctly. This is how you do it. You're doing it wrong." And she just sat back, quietly observed him, and she was like, "Okay. That's not at all how you do it." And then she just, did it correctly. She didn't say anything to him. So he just fell in love with her. For their first date, Bill actually invited his parents and two of his parents' friend on their first date.
Aw.
Mm-hmm. So that's interesting.
That's so cute.
Maybe he just really thought that
he just knew she was the one, and let's speed this up. Bring the girl home to mom right away.
Right out of the gates. So they were married in 1985. In 1989, they had their daughter, Hayley. She was a graduate of Miss Porter School, which for anybody that doesn't know is a very prestigious prep school in Farmington, Connecticut.
#Connecticut.
Yeah. She was on the varsity cross country team. She was on the basketball team. She rode crew. She was a high school honor roll student, straight A student. She was elected to a senior leadership position of the Athletic Association head, and she was awarded for exceptional community service because her mom was diagnosed with MS in 1998, and she was devastated. So she wanted to help her mom. She wanted to raise money for her. So she started an MS walk team called Hayley's Hope. She was the captain. And in 7 years, through sponsorships and donations, she raised over $55,000 as a spokesperson for the society. And her friends, so she was accepted to Dartmouth and would have started in the fall to study medicine like her dad. And close friends said she could have bragged about her life and all of her accomplishments, but never did. They said she didn't brag, not once, never.
Wow.
Just very humble, very wholesome.
I'd brag about a whole lot less than that.
100%.
Yeah.
I'd be like, I'm going to Dartmouth. Did you hear I'm going to Dartmouth? Did you hear I'm going
Where
to Dartmouth?
are you going to school again? Is it something with a Dartmouth, right?
Dartmouth.
Dartmouth.
Yeah, it's Dartmouth. And then the youngest daughter, Michaela, was born in 1995. She was going to take over Hayley's Hope when Hayley went to college and call it Michaela's Miracles.
Oh my gosh.
And she loved to cook for her family and did so the evening of the murders. Her grandparents and her aunt said that she was the shyest kid, that she was so shy she would look down when she was walking, but said that if she ever saw somebody by themselves or having trouble, that she would stop and talk to them, which it just breaks my heart.
I'm
What a good
choosing
kid.
to listen to you describe these people and forgetting why you're describing them to me. They sound wonderful.
This case is just absolutely heartbreaking. So when I say like this is, after a crime, you're gonna have a hard time finding people saying bad things about people. But I would feel comfortable in saying that nobody had a bad thing to say about any of these people. I mean, they were involved in their church. I mean, the mom was involved in committees and she taught CCD and. Bill Petit.
That's the good kind of church.
Yes. Yeah. Bill Petit was, beloved as this doctor and endocrinologist. And again, the daughters were just very impressive. So they had very bright futures. So July 22nd, 2007 was the day that Josh and Steven were planning to do this. It was a typical summer day for the Petits. Bill, Jennifer, and Michaela all went to church. Bill played golf in the afternoon with his father, and then Jennifer and Michaela went to the beach. Hayley had been with friends, but she was going to be home for dinner. So Michaela wanted to cook dinner for the family. Around 7:30, they went to Stop and Shop to buy groceries. And Joshua Komisarjevsky was in the parking lot and saw Michaela and Jennifer drive up in a Mercedes. Joshua said he was there to meet get payment from a contractor he worked for that day. And he said he saw them pull up in the nice car and it caught his attention. So after he got paid by the contractor, they bought the groceries they needed, they left, and he said that he decided to follow them home for whatever reason.
Gee, I wonder what that reason might have been.
Yeah. He saw their house and thought it would be nice to live there someday and have no financial stress. Now, he said that it was because he saw the nice car, the nice home, but a lot of the attorneys involved, a lot of the arguments were that he was attracted and drawn to Michaela.
Ugh.
Yeah.
And this is the one that has the 5-year-old daughter?
Yes. Ugh. That's why I'm like, isn't it so
what
fucked
is
up?
Like, wrong with him?
Like, you put your 5-year-old to bed and then you go do this. Like, I don't know. I don't understand. But Michaela and Jennifer went home. Michaela made a pasta dinner for the family. Around 10 p.m., they all sat down to watch Army Wives together, which was one of their favorite shows. And Bill read a newspaper on the couch. When the show ended at 11, the girls locked up the house and went upstairs. They left a light on in the kitchen for the cat, which is like my mom's move. She loves to waste electricity for the animals. Bill fell asleep on the couch, which he said was not unusual because he didn't want to disturb Jennifer in bed after she fell asleep because she had MS and he wanted to make sure she got her rest. So Hayley went to her own room and Michaela and Jennifer curled up in the master bed and read the newest Harry Potter book together, which I looked it up. Deathly Hallows was released on July 14th, 2007. So that must have been the book that they were reading together. So again, as I mentioned, Hayes and Komisarjevsky during this time had gone to the bar, had some drinks, canvassed the house, had some more drinks, and then came back, parked on the street. And around 3 a.m., they walked up to the Petit home. Now, Steven said that Joshua went straight to the back and found this unlocked basement door. Joshua said that, they put on their face masks. He said that they were working on the fly, but even it doesn't seem like this seemed very calculated to me. Whether or not the Petits were the target, I don't know at what point exactly they solidified that. Maybe it is after he saw them at Stop and Shop, but I don't think they were working on the fly. I think Steven had a contractor, like a construction hat, like one of those like Carhartt ones that he cut holes in and pulled it down over his face. And then Joshua either had a t-shirt or a handkerchief that he cut holes in and put over his face. And they got in again through that basement door, which was unlocked. He said, I didn't know this word before, Bilko doors.
Oh, yeah.
They're those big metal.
Yep.
Yeah, the big metal doors. So he said that he found that those were open and he went down there and the door from the basement to the house was also unlocked.
Fortunately, if you ever tried to get through my Bilko door, you would hear it 3 towns over. It's very loud.
That's good. That's a great alarm system.
Yeah, it's built in.
I like that.
Yep.
So they could see Bill sleeping on the couch. So when Josh walked in, he said that he wanted a weapon because he didn't want to take him without a weapon. Which, by the way, Steven had a BB gun on him that they had bought at the Walmart in Southington the day before. So he had that. So after Joshua entered, he grabbed this baseball bat, which this is a completely random fact, but I just wrote it down. It was actually a giveaway from a rum brand from a store that Bill's father owned that he had in the house. Completely random fact, but anyways, I wrote it down. So there you go. You're welcome. So again, the stories diverge. So Joshua said he's got this bat and he walks up to the dad and he said that he stood over him for about 15 to 20 minutes, just, mustering up the courage to do something. He's like, I couldn't do it. He said, and Steven's at the window just motioning me to do it. Steven says Joshua walks right into the house, starts beating the shit out of Bill. And he's motioning to him like, stop, this wasn't the plan. What are you doing?
Yikes.
So I'm really leaning again more towards Steven's story, just based on Joshua's history and what a obvious sociopath / psychopath he is. Either way, Bill was woken up by being slammed in the head with this baseball bat. He hit him 4 or 5 times, and he had a split basically from his eyebrow like to the back of his head. I mean, he was in rough shape. So they hit him with the bat, and then Josh let Steven in the house through the door. And Josh said that when he hit Bill in the head, Bill let out an unearthly scream that Josh had never heard before. And he wanted him to stop, so he just kept hitting him until he stopped. And he said at one point, Bill was just like curled up in the corner of the couch staring at him confused.
Right. He was down on the couch. Okay.
Of course he's confused. If you woke up with someone slamming you in the head with a baseball bat,
my God.
like, what
hopefully
else
he like didn't know. Hopefully the first hit just took him out.
So I don't know that he was completely unconscious from the start. Because, so they tied him up. They tied his hands and his feet with ropes and zip ties. And Bill heard one of the guys say, if he moves, put 2 bullets in him. So now Joshua says that didn't happen, that they asked him. Well, he didn't say specifically that didn't happen, but he said, I just said, is there anybody else in the house? And but why would he ask if there was anybody else in the house if he followed them from Stop and Shop and knows that they have a kid?
Yeah, where do you think the small child went overnight? Like
Right,
it's 3 a.m.
I'm thinking she's in the house, and that's why you're interested in it.
Yeah.
So again, multiple stories, but they said, is there anybody else in the house? He told them that the girls were upstairs. So
Bill did?
Bill told them that the girls were home.
Talking.
Yeah, he was apparently.
This is what I'm saying. Like I'm sure he wasn't dead off the bat. No pun intended. No, I'm so sorry. It's not. I had to.
Literally, no pun intended.
Yeah, but the fact that he could even comprehend anything and then respond after getting 3 or 4 blows to the head.
I would assume that there's got to be a pure adrenaline aspect too, right? Because you're like, what is happening?
Wow.
And of course, just, to reassure him, Josh and Steven said, don't worry, we're just here for money. Like, don't worry. We're here for money. It's going to be okay. They asked Bill if he had a safe. He said, there's no safe. So Steven and Josh go upstairs with their BB gun and rope. They find Michaela in bed asleep with Jen. So Steven goes over to Jen's side of the bed and Joshua goes over to Michaela's, and they both put their hands over their mouth and shake them awake.
Can you imagine?
No.
I fucking bite them.
I mean, have you ever had that sensation where you roll over in bed and you open your eyes and there's a shadow and it looks like a person and your heart drops to your toes?
Yes.
Can you imagine? But there's actually someone standing there.
And they're holding you.
Yeah, no.
Yeah.
This is so I've listened, of course, we've been listening to all these podcasts and listening to crimes being retold, but it is so much more real listening to you describe this. I'm like, it's awful.
It's unimaginable. It's unimaginable what happened to this family. They said that they were confused but compliant, and they tied their hands and feet and put pillowcases over their heads so they couldn't see them. Now, Joshua, being the noble person that he was, I don't know at what point this happened, but he said that he knew that the pillowcases were probably hot. So he rolled them up so that they only covered their eyes, so that their nose and mouth were still showing, so that it wasn't too hot. I know, right?
Yeah. Very considerate.
So thoughtful. So then they went down to Hayley's room. Steven stood over Hayley with a gun and shook her awake. And they told Hayley that they wouldn't hurt her and just wanted money, which is the same thing that they told to Michaela and Jennifer. They tied their hands and their feet. Now, at this point, all the women were tied, but they weren't restrained to anything.
Okay.
Because at one point they get tied to their beds, but right now they're just tied but not restrained. And I mean, they kept mentioning that they were compliant through the whole night, because these men kept saying, like, we're not going to hurt you. All we want is money. We're not going to hurt you. I want to say that I probably would believe them too and be compliant, because you don't know what they're going to do if you're not compliant.
Also, I can't fight anybody.
Well, no.
I would not win. I would try to get up and run and I'd be tackled and physically can't fight somebody. So there's I have a better chance of hoping that they are telling the truth, that they just want money.
They were wearing masks when they came in the house?
They were, yeah.
I would probably believe them then because they're not showing me their face. But if they were doing this, saying they're not going to hurt me, they're not going to hurt me, and I could see their face, they're lying. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that's actually a really good point. That's
I don't think that thought would go through my head. I think I would be peeing myself probably.
I think I would just want to believe them enough to listen to them and be compliant. I would just want to believe them enough. So the men, after they tied everybody up, the men proceeded through the house looking for valuables. When they were in Jennifer's room, she was telling them where the valuables and the jewelry was. She confirmed there was no safe in the house. Joshua was only interested in money, but apparently Steven was sort of roaming for like jewels and whatever else he could find in the house. So they'd gone downstairs too. Bill was still bleeding profusely on the couch in the sunroom. Joshua said he put a towel on his head because he was bleeding and he wanted to help him. So that was really
super helpful,
really thoughtful of him. So they ended up moving him down to the basement and they tied him to a support pole. And again, Joshua wanted him to be comfortable, so he put pillows under him. And now something to know about Bill is he was on blood thinners for a heart issue that he had in the past. And now even without blood thinners, head wounds bleed profusely. So he was on blood thinners. So he was bleeding profusely. Yikes. And I guess Joshua said at one point that he's probably responsible for saving his life because he put that sort of towel and sort of makeshift pressure bandage on his head. Yeah, he's a real
stand-up guy.
He is a stand-up guy. That's what I was going to say. So they ended up moving Bill to the basement. He's tied to the support pole, and that's where he stays for the rest of the night. Men found beer in the basement, drank throughout the night, really just helped themselves. So around 3:30 or 4 o'clock in the morning, Steven found a check register for Bank of America, and it said that they had $40,000 in the account. So they were
so for a half hour approximately, they've got the women tied up upstairs, and they're just roaming around the house. Bill's in the basement.
Mm-hmm.
That's terrifying.
So you're upstairs with a pillowcase over your eyes, not your mouth, and listening. I presume you can hear these
ransacking.
Just because I think I always assume this all happens in like a minute. You know what I mean? In a couple minutes, but to sit for a half hour, you know?
Oh, a half hour. This went on for 7 hours.
I can't.
They entered the house around 3 a.m. and they did not leave until around 10 a.m.
Oh my God.
7 hours they put this family through. 7 hours.
Awful.
So it's 3:30, 4 o'clock. They find this this check register, and they were like, "Wow, that's a lot of money. What if we sent the mom to the bank to get the money, but not all the money, because the bank would be suspicious if we took out the whole 40,000. So let's take out 15." So they decide, "Wow, that's a great plan. Yes, let's do that." Let's send the mom in the morning, and I guess let's just chill with this family for another 5 hours, because it's like 4 in the morning when they decide this bank doesn't open till 9 a.m. Mm-hmm. So that's where they are. They talked to the mom about it. They said, Jennifer, this is our idea. And she says, no problem. I will do this. She's completely compliant, wants to save her family, says no problem. So Joshua says, while he's in the room with Jennifer and Michaela, he said that he locked eyes with Michaela.
Locked eyes from across the room. I'm sorry. That's the only thing I could think of when I heard that.
So, he locked eyes with Michaela and was taken back by how calm she was.
Because she's 11.
Yep. He said it's like she understood that they wouldn't hurt them, and it caught him off guard. He was just so taken back with her. This 11-year-old.
By the innocence of a child, some would say.
Mm-hmm. So they're hanging out in this house. Joshua was in charge of Michaela and Bill, and Steven was in charge of Hayley and Jennifer. Throughout the night, they let them use the bathroom. They would untie them and let them, go. They'd get them a glass of water. Very just gracious hosts.
Very gentlemanly.
How surreal that would have been
while invading this house.
Awful,
They're
but
giving
surreal.
me water. I'm not going to think you're going to kill. Why are you hydrating me?
Yeah.
Yes. Mm-hmm. So then the men realized it's starting to get light outside, and Joshua's car was still down the street. And by the way, sometime I read this in one article around 4:30 in the morning. One of the neighbors drove home from work and drove by their house and didn't notice anything. And apparently the Pettits had no blinds or curtains in their windows downstairs. So like they could have seen them. It's not like they shut the shades. Like they could have seen them doing this. But they just didn't. They were just driving. And I'm thinking, like, when I drive home, like, I'm going to drive home tonight, I don't look around me at all. I don't observe my surroundings, which is terrible. But I just
you
don't.
should be watching the road, so that's
well,
okay.
no. I watch the road, but I wouldn't be looking at, like, random houses on the side of the street to notice
and how
that.
would you actually, in that amount of time, be able to pick out that something is really terrible
in the
or something like
register that this is what's happening?
Exactly.
Yeah. So they decided they have to move his car. They argue about how they're going to move it. So it's at this point that they start tying people to their bed. So they moved Michaela from the room with her mom into her own room. They tied her hands and her feet to her bed frame. Same thing with Hayley. Same thing with Jennifer. And now Joshua confessed after this. And one of the things that you can tell his confession is absolute bullshit. He said at this point that Bill was just... his hands and feet were tied, but he was on the couch. And when they left the house, they said he was completely free to, he wasn't restrained to anything. No fucking way. I get that he was in really, really rough shape, but there's no way they would leave the house with everybody restrained except him. They wouldn't just leave him on the couch. So that he's full of shit.
Yeah.
But so Steven drove the family car, the Petit family car, and Joshua took his car, and they ended up moving it to a condo complex nearby. And then they fought on the way back because Joshua was afraid of getting stopped for speeding on the way back to this crime. I mean, yeah.
Fair.
Where are you going in such a hurry there?
So they get back to the house, and, they started thinking like, oh no, what if somebody has to go to work? Like, won't they notice that they're missing from work? So they go down to Bill and they're like, where do you work? What do you do? Like, what's happening? And he was like, I don't need to be at work until 8:30, but I'm supposed to do rounds at the hospital at 7. So like, that's not going to work. So they go up to Jennifer and they're like, what do you do? And she's like, I'm a nurse. I work at a school. Like, I'm a teacher. It's fine. It's the summer. I don't have to be anywhere. And they were like, okay, well, we need you to call Bill out of work. And she said, okay. So they untie her. They bring her downstairs. She calls Bill's work and said, he's not going to be in today. He doesn't feel well. She doesn't say anything while she's on the phone. She's very compliant.
What can you do? Like, I keep trying to put myself in these positions and think like there's literally nothing coded you could say. Nothing. I first of all could not come up with anything, but what is the person going to think?
I know.
Like, other than it's kind of weird that the wife's calling him, but then, just like, you'd feel so helpless talking to someone.
Right.
Yeah, like the person who answered the phone call at work that day definitely feels terrible. But like, how would you have known?
No, you wouldn't. Yeah, you would not have known. God, but I mean, they had been married for over 20 years. Like, and if she knew the people at the hospital, if you think if your husband was like truly that ill, if they were still sleeping, you'd call them out of work. So I don't think it would be enough to raise red flags for anybody.
You'd have to say something strange, like, and just strange enough that the person on the other line would be like, somebody should go check on him. But I don't know what you would say in that scenario. But
would they? Because how many times have you had a hunch where you're like, that feels weird, and then do absolutely nothing about it?
Right.
Yeah. So, but then they were like, okay, so she's compliant. I feel good about this. I think this bank thing is going to work. She's cooperating. Like, we're going to be good to go. So Josh is hanging around Michaela's bedroom for most of the night because he's disgusting. And Steven came in and said, I've got to talk to you. Steven realizes that he's, canvassing the house and touching everything, and that his eyelashes are falling out all over the house, and, that his gloves had broken, and now he's worried about DNA. He's worried about...
Well, that's what happens when you spend 7 hours in a house.
Oh, yeah. Just like drinking beer. Yeah. He said he was using their toilet. He was afraid that his pee splashed up and, would lead to DNA. And now they're convicted felons. So like they're in the system. So like you're hit anyways. So, he said, we need to get gasoline because, we need to destroy the DNA evidence. Again, this is where Steven and Josh's stories diverge. Yep. Joshua said, gasoline, we're not going to light a fire. I'm stunned by this idea. Steven says, well, no, my plan was never to start a fire. I just thought that if I poured gasoline on everything, they would need hazmat teams, and that would help destroy the evidence and it would slow them down.
Wasn't he supposed to be the brain?
No, not Steven. Steven was the one that nobody, nobody accused.
Yeah.
Honestly, if he really didn't intend to light it, interesting concept, because everyone's going to be very careful with a bunch of stuff doused in gasoline.
Right. I think
Interesting, but I don't know that I believe it.
I think the more likely story is Steven said that he was concerned about DNA, was concerned that Joshua was leaving hairs, he was leaving eyelashes, sweat, whatever. and Joshua said fire destroys everything.
Yeah.
And he
Joshua
said
was like, I have a plan for that.
And the concept was raised, not that they would burn the house down with the family in it, but that when Joshua went to the bank with Jennifer, when Steven went to the bank with Jennifer, Joshua would take the rest of the family out in the other car, and then they would burn the house down while they were all out of it. So he said that was the plan. So Steven went downstairs, got gallons of windshield washer fluid, and emptied them out. So he had these gallon buckets.
Oh, like to get gas. He had to go get the gas.
Yes, he had to go get gasoline. Yeah. So he left the house around 7 a.m. And bought about $10 of gas. And apparently he got lost trying to find the gas station and called Josh. And he was like, how do I get back to Cheshire from Waterbury? And,
what an idiot.
Apparently he was driving towards like Southington, and he was at like Richard Chevrolet and was like, where's the closest gas station? And Josh was like, Southington, like you're going the wrong way.
Yikes.
And then he ended up in Waterbury.
Also, we don't live in the middle of nowhere. There are like gas stations everywhere. Was there a very specific gas station he needed to go to?
Well, where they live in Cheshire too, if you're coming out to Route 10, the main road, there's like literally a gas station at every exit onto the main road.
Yeah.
Like almost every one, whichever way you come out.
Had to get those reward points. Got to go to Shell, right? Like,
well, they did go to Stop and
matters.
Shop. Doesn't Stop and Shop sponsor Shell?
Yes, there is some sort of a relationship there.
Yeah.
So you got to get the points. He went grocery shopping earlier in the day.
They were short on money, so.
Yeah. So Steven comes back to the house again. Joshua is in Michaela's room. He says, Steven comes back in again and says, I've got to talk to you. And he says he's, raving about the DNA. And he says, you said my name in front of them. You called me Steven. And Joshua says, we've got the masks on. They've got the pillowcases on. Like we're fine. So they confess. But each of them are just pointing fingers at each other, and basically they both escalated the situation, and it was out of control. But around 8:30 a.m., Steven unties Jennifer completely, and they leave to go to Bank of America. And at that point, Bill was still tied in the basement, and the girls were tied to their beds upstairs. At that point, when Steven left, Joshua let Hayley use the bathroom and then tied her back up. And then he went into Michaela's room. So trigger warning for anybody, because child sexual assault is involved. So he says now in his confession, he calls her KK the whole time.
Ew.
Which is the family's nickname for her. And he called her that because he heard Jennifer and Hayley calling her that. So he calls her KK through his whole confession.
That's awful.
He said that him and KK were just shooting the shit. And he said he thought that she was between 14 and 16, which
that makes it
so much better.
It's yeah. Yeah.
Ugh,
I don't know
what a dirtbag.
What difference does that make?
No.
So he says, again, this is from his confession. He says he's talking to KK about school, summer plans, and I quote, one thing led to another, and he performed oral sex on her.
What?
So, like, when you say one thing led to another, you're like, oh, I was out at the bar drinking. One thing led to another. I got home at 2 a.m. You're not like, oh, I was talking to an 11-year-old in her bedroom while I was kidnapping her, and one thing led to another, and I performed oral sex on her.
Ugh.
Not the... Yeah, no.
No.
One thing led to another. No, does not fit there.
Nothing led to... No.
Yeah. He said he cut off her shirt and skirt with a pair of scissors, and he left the pillowcase on her head. Ugh. And the police asked, and I don't know why they asked this question. They said, was it against her will?
What?
I don't know if they were just doing it to like shore up the confession, because there's literally no answer to that question other than yes.
She's 11.
Right.
Yeah.
He said, and I quote, her hands were tied, but her feet weren't. He said it started off against her will, but then she wasn't resisting, so he kept going.
Ugh.
And then
Disgusting.
He said after he assaulted her, he pleasured himself and ejaculated on her stomach in a disgusting display of power, is what he said. And then he took sexually explicit photos of her while she was naked. I mean, like, disgusting photos.
What a garbage human being.
Yeah. He said that he was going to use them to blackmail the Petit family later on. But Steven said that had to be a lie because you couldn't even tell who it was from the photos.
Because she had the pillowcase over her head.
And it was just like genitals and like disgusting.
So they were
photos.
just for him, like as
They
like
were
a
just
small remembrance of the evening.
Disgusting. And he was adamant that he did not rape her. He was adamant that it was only oral sex, but a rectal swab that was taken from inside of her had his DNA on it. So they do not believe that he did not rape her.
Awful.
So he said after that, he let her shower and change because he had ejaculated on her stomach. And then he let her get dressed while he waited in the hallway because he wanted to give her privacy. And then he said he went back in and he tied her feet, but not her hands because she was just being so compliant. And then he said he went and he checked on Hayley and Bill. And he said while this was happening, Steve called him with updates and said it was going well and said that Jennifer was aware that things would go badly for her if she didn't comply. So around 9:21 a.m., there was a 911 call from a bank employee. It was the banking center manager, Mary Lyons. And she said, "We have a lady who's in our bank right now who says that her husband and children are being held at their house. The people are in a car outside the bank. She's getting $15,000 to bring out to them. That if the police are told, they will kill her children and the husband. Her name is Jennifer Petit." So shortly after the call was made, officers were dispatched to the Petit home, but they were instructed by their superiors to not enter the house. There was a suspicion that Jennifer was being complicit in the cash withdrawal because of how calm she was.
Are you kidding
Oh my God.
me?
So the officers were told not to attempt to speak with Steven when he arrived at the house, and they were told not to contact anybody at the residence via the house. They were told to set up a perimeter and monitor the situation because they said they had no information that any violent activity was happening.
I'm furious for them.
Because I could have gone with it if you said they were told not to go in because they were told not to go in because they were afraid they would like kill them on site or something, kill the people on site. But to have them go in, like not do anything is
so there was this was part of one of their appeals, but there were police calls that were released after the fact, and one of the lieutenants said apparently she came into the bank, she tried to get some money out. One of the accounts was in her husband's name, and she said, "Well, my kids are at home tied up." So we don't really know if they really are or if she was just trying to get money out at this point.
Are you kidding me?
The lieutenant said she was calm and she didn't appear upset. She walked into the bank. She got the money. She was by herself. The other person was in the car.
Like, wouldn't you err on the side of like, okay, let's hold the money. We'll like give them, but we'll watch it. Like, let's just make sure nobody's getting murdered. Like, wouldn't you go on that side?
This woman was such a badass bitch, right? Like, she did everything right. She calmly went into the bank to not arouse suspicion. She calmly told them, like, this is the situation, like, help me, but like, do not make a big scene of it.
Yeah.
And the police response was basically like, she seems suspicious. Well, do you think she seems suspicious when her family's tied up at home?
And I think she was like so compliant and so just focused on helping her family. Mm-hmm. I actually think the only reason she told them that this was happening, and this is sort of taking it from part of Steven's discussion on a podcast, so again, take it with a grain of salt, but he said that she had come out and she said, you know, like, I did everything I had to do. Like, they didn't want to give it to me because I didn't have it all in my account and they weren't going to give it to me. And I said, listen, I need this money. They have my family. So like, had they just handed her over the money, I don't even know that she would have told them what was going on. Like, I think my understanding is that she only told them because she had to get the money. And that's why they said, you know, part of the money was in her husband's account. So we're not sure if they're just trying to get it. So yeah, the cops, and they actually called over the broadcast. They said 3 suspects. One is a female, supposedly in the upstairs bedroom, possibly dead with the other 2. And at that point too, they also, they said, I want to set up a perimeter. As soon as everyone is geared up, you know, we're gonna end up having to make contact. A hostage negotiator was paged, and they were like, nope, we don't need you. We're good. We're good.
Okay.
We're good right now.
A lot of missed opportunity here.
Yeah, we're good. So, and again, the timeline, it ended up getting released later on with the police, but apparently Jennifer and Steven probably could have been intercepted on the way back to the house. So they probably could have saved the mother. Yeah, because when the call came in, there was someone in that area. So they probably could have intercepted the car. And when it initially happened, the police said, we were getting there just as they were coming out of the house. And then the timeline showed that that was not true. And Steven said that he actually saw the cop when they were pulling up and walking into the house. But again, take that with a grain of salt because he's full of shit. So Steven and Jen came back with the money in the envelopes. You know, again, this is where the stories diverge. So I'm actually just going to go with Steven's because I think it's true. I think that's the more likely scenario. So Steven gets back and he says, we're good. We've got the money. And Josh says, we've got a problem. We have to kill them because I left DNA with one of the kids.
My bad.
Yep, he says so. I'm going to have to take care of the kids and you are going to have to square it up and take care of Jennifer.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. So again, they're like Joshua said, I never agreed to kill anybody. Like, what are you talking about?
Right.
We've got the money. Like, bullshit. No, you didn't. You're an asshole. No, that's a lie. 100%. So Hayes says that he, you know, looked outside. He saw the cops and he felt betrayed and said he just like basically blacked out, went into a rage, pulled down Jennifer's Petit's pants and raped her. Just like rage. He said it was not for sexual pleasure. He said he just
rage raping.
Went into a fit of rage and raped her and
one does. Yeah.
and strangled her.
Yikes.
And then so that was happening. Joshua hears a noise and he says Dr. Petit escaped. So just to go back, while Jennifer is being raped by Steven, Dr. Petit is in the basement and he was doing what he could to stay alive. He was in and out of consciousness. He kept trying to stand up to keep the blood flowing. He basically would pass out from the blood loss.
God,
like
he's been bleeding for like 7 hours now.
Yes, he was not doing good. He said he could hear a thumping coming from upstairs and he thought it was the men ransacking the house. And then he heard a moan and again, at that time, it was his wife being raped and strangled. And he said that he yelled out, hey, and one of the men said, don't worry, it will all be over soon. Ugh. So he said at that point, he knew it was going to end badly. He said he knew he couldn't take the two men based on his current state. Yeah. So he was rubbing his wrist ties, the zip ties together, and the plastic broke. His ankles were still zip tied, but he hopped and rolled. He tripped out of the basement. He rolled to his neighbor's house and was pounding on the garage door.
Oh my gosh.
He was in such bad shape. His neighbor of 18 years said, can I help you, sir?
Oh my God.
He did not know who
didn't
he
recognize
was.
him at all.
Nope. He had to say, it's me. It's Bill. Like call 911 quick. Like he didn't realize he had seen people in the bushes, he said, when he was like rolling out, but he didn't realize like the cops were there.
I was just going to ask, like, did the cops see him coming out and like, what did they think of it?
Apparently the cops, what I heard was that the cops saw him coming out and did nothing. They were like so focused on the house. And then I think they thought that he might have been like a perpetrator. So they like, then they ran up to him and they were like, what's going on? And he said, the girls are in the house.
Well, and I think it's really easy to be harsh on like how they handled this because A, it's retrospect. We're looking, we have all the information. We know exactly what's happening. B, this is Cheshire, Connecticut. Like,
I know.
These are not things where these heinous crimes happen all the time and they're prepared for this and like kind of know what to expect. Like, no, they've got nothing for experience.
No, they don't have training for this. So Joshua said Bill escaped. He escaped. So he's freaking out. And he said at that time he turned and saw that Jennifer was dead on the living room floor with her pants around her ankles. He said he knew she was dead because he was an EMT. And he said he could see that her face was blue and purple. So I'm sure it took a real scientist to figure that out at that point. So they realize Bill escaped and they both freak out. Again, their stories diverge. Joshua is adamant that nobody was supposed to die, that Steven just started running around and pouring gasoline around the house, said he poured it upstairs in the hallway. And Joshua went upstairs to shut the girls' bedroom doors because he wanted to buy them time, because he said you couldn't seriously be wanting to burn these girls alive. And the officer said, did you ever think about untying them?
Yeah, like,
no.
what about KK? KK couldn't he used a head start there?
No, it didn't cross his mind. He said it didn't cross his mind. He just wanted to shut the doors to buy them more time. Reason why this story's bullshit. So again, he said he only poured it in the hallway, closed the doors, and they went downstairs. I believe Steven's version, which is that Joshua poured the gasoline upstairs, Steven poured it downstairs. Both Hayley and Michaela had gasoline poured on them while they were alive.
That's one of my worst nightmares.
Yep.
For sure.
Yeah. So they poured all the gasoline in the house. Both men pointed the finger at each other as to who lit the match. Most likely scenario is that Joshua lit the match, flicked it in the kitchen. Whole house went up in flames. Up in flames because the gasoline.
I'm shocked they didn't burn themselves, actually.
Yeah. Well, and one of them said that they thought it was going to be one of those like movie scenarios where because of the gasoline, like the windows blow out. So they just like wanted to get out of there. So the house went up in flames. Both Michaela and Hayley were alive when the fire was lit. Michaela died of smoke inhalation tied to her bed. And Hayley had been found at the top landing of the stairway. She was alive and walking while the fire was lit. She had 3rd and 4th degree burns to her feet, and her front was more burnt than her back. So she was like facing the fire. And they said that she probably had untied herself. She'd gotten free and she was trying to save Michaela when she was overcome by smoke. I'm going to cry. Whew. Jennifer was so badly burned she had to be ID'd by dental records. So at 9:56, both of the guys run out. They get into the Pettit's car. It's like a Chrysler SUV. Joshua gets in the driver's seat. Hayes gets in the passenger seat. Joshua started to reverse and heard sirens, turns around, sees there's an unmarked car behind him blocking the driveway, which he hit. And then he said he was panic stricken and basically forgot how to drive. He said he was like stuck in the bushes, forgot how to drive. He said Hayes put it in drive for him, told him to gas it. And they ended up hitting cruisers that were barricading the road, airbags deployed, and both men were instructed out of the car by the police department. And I will say one thing that the Cheshire Police Department did that I thought was really smart is they set up the cars in the street in like a V pattern facing the house so that when they hit the cars, they sort of just like ran into each other. You know what I'm saying? So that
versus being past them.
Yeah. So that it didn't just push the car out of the way where they could continue to go. So that was like a really smart way to set up the cars. 7 hours. So it was from 3 a.m. until 10 in the morning. And again, Dr. Bill Pettit was the only survivor. Now, here's the crazy part. So I remember, just being from Connecticut, people would talk about like, how as a father could you leave the house and leave your family in the house? Like, how could you save yourself? Like, I would have done this. I would have gone up. I would have saved them. So Bill was in the hospital after this. The average adult has 9 to 12 pints of blood. You die around 50 to 75% blood loss. And the doctors estimated that Bill had lost 7 pints of blood that night. So it is a literal miracle that he is alive. Wow. So for people saying like, how could he not do this? Like, he was barely conscious. Like, it is a miracle that he is alive.
Because he was out of the house before the fire?
He was, yes.
Right.
He was.
So what did you expect him to go back in his...
Well, they were just saying like
go fight them. Like, don't leave the house.
Yes, that he should have gone upstairs. He was in no shape. No. I mean, like, and... Again, with the beating that he took to his head, he was in no shape. But hearing that about the blood loss, and because he was on blood thinners, so he was just like profusely bleeding. So like, it's a miracle he didn't die. And Jennifer's parents said they went to see him in the hospital, and all he kept doing was apologizing for not saving Jennifer and the kids.
Yeah, I'm sure that like he regrets it, even though he has no reason to. I'm sure he feels that way. So he doesn't need people
Like
saying
survivor's
that.
guilt, right?
Yeah,
Right.
totally.
Right. And they just kept saying, like, stop it. It's not your fault. Like, please, we're just so happy that you are alive. So again, we touched base briefly. You know, there was a lot of scrutiny about Cheshire Police Department, and I'm really like a devil's advocate for this. So like, there's no precedent for this in this town. Like this town was not prepared to handle that level of crime.
No.
But it does seem like things maybe should have gone differently. But you know, people, when they were asked, they said, you know, had I known that was going on in the house. So the Cheshire PD were set up outside the house while Jennifer was raped and strangled and while the girls were lit on fire. So that's why they were like, you were there and you didn't do anything. They were like, you didn't have a hostage negotiator. You didn't knock on the door. You didn't peek in the windows. They didn't have shades. They were like, you could have looked in the windows to see what was going on. They would have seen Steven raping Jennifer. Like they would have known.
Yeah.
But they said there was no indication that, you know, that there was any violence happening. And like I read before, you know, they thought maybe she was complicit. You know, they were dealing with this like potential hostage situation that they didn't understand the full extent of. Again, hindsight is completely 2020.
I still feel like something like that you should probably take more seriously and
err on the side of caution.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So here's what gets me. So again, like I said, devil's advocate, I know none of us can put ourselves in that position as a police officer. They didn't know what they were going into. They didn't know what was happening inside. Michael Malone, the town manager, said, and this is a quote, "I just can't say enough good things about how proud I am of the extraordinary effort of our police officers and our firefighters. They're extremely well trained. They're a great group of professionals. And I think today exemplified the finest of what the police and fire were all about in this community. And I can't thank them enough because without their great work, this could have been a far worse tragedy. We were very, very fortunate." Now, let me just ask you this. One person survived with no help at all from the police or fire. He literally just crawled his way out of the house without any of their assistance. How could it have been a worse tragedy?
Oh my God.
That's what I was wondering. How does it get worse? He dies too? Okay. Well, he basically wishes he would have died that day with his family, I'm sure.
Yeah.
So
Right. So like I said, devil's advocate, don't go say things like that.
No.
I cannot defend you when you say
do
things
better
like
instead of saying that.
It could have been a far worse tragedy. No, bro.
No,
Bro.
it was pretty bad.
Bruh. Don't do that. So, and after this happened too, there was a lot of scrutiny on the parole board. Basically, like, nobody was getting let out on parole after this happened because they were like,
Look what happened last time.
yeah,
Whoops.
they were like, halt the brakes. And basically they were like, there were no flags. There were no red flags that these two men would do what they did.
So I will give them that because yes, they were super creepy and watching people sleep and all that, but none of it had been to that extent. Like you really think
Hadn't
they're gonna
harmed anyone before.
Yeah, and you definitely because they had never murdered anyone,
No.
right? Like this was their only. So I'll give them that. Like I mean, burglary. I don't like the word. Is not at all on the same plane as this.
Right.
So.
And typically you do have like an escalation of behavior. So if you're really, again, hindsight's 2020, if you're studying Joshua's, history, you might see like, he's going into these houses, he's watching people sleep, like something sketch. It's like he wanted someone to wake up. Like, why would you be going in at night when people are home unless you're looking for a confrontation at some point? But again, like I will give him that, like, even if they had that sentencing transcript, they might have still let him go. Like, so everybody just wanted to point fingers.
Of course.
And again, like, I don't blame the Cheshire PD, but don't come out and say you did the best job ever. Because, like, it went
super tone deaf.
It went almost as bad as it could.
Yeah.
Like, you caught them. And Jennifer's sister, she said, oh, they told me they caught them. And she was like, who cares? My family's dead.
Yeah.
Like,
all right,
wonderful.
you get to know what happened, but that's the only closure you get.
Right. So both of the men were charged with a lot of charges. They each had at least 6 capital felonies. I believe Hayes had 16 charges and Komisarjevsky had 17 charges. Now, both men offered to plead guilty in exchange for life without the possibility of parole, and the state rejected the offer and made them go to trial. Because in Connecticut, you cannot impose the death penalty without a trial.
Okay.
That's what I was just going to ask. Because I was going to say it doesn't seem like a win to be in prison for life without parole, but I guess compared to the death penalty, it is for them.
Which one of the I think it was on the HBO documentary. I think it was Mike Lawler who said anybody that told Dr. Petit that these two were going to be put to death lied to him, because Connecticut has not really. We had the death penalty; it's abolished now, but we had it. And I think like the only person we'd put to death in like 30 years was Michael Ross, and it was because he waived his appeals and like basically begged us to put him to death. So
Do you know
were like,
when they stopped the death penalty?
I do.
I thought you might.
Let me get to that.
Okay. Yep.
So I have that in here because this case impacted the abolition of the death penalty.
Interesting.
So again, both men said, we won't put everybody through the state's evidence is overwhelming. We waive the trials. We'll plead guilty, but we want life without parole. And the state said no. So Hayes began his trial on September 13th, 2010. He tried to commit suicide during jury selection in January. So there were a lot of delays going on with his mental health issues. There was like a competency hearing in there. His lawyers made claims that his cell was inhumane. So the judge went out and inspected it. And can we just appreciate the irony of the state spending all of its time and resources trying to keep a man they're trying to put to death from committing suicide in prison?
Yeah.
Well,
just let him do it.
Officially known they were going to put him to death at that point.
Yeah, but they were trying to.
Yeah.
They were
trying.
trying to get the death penalty. So can we just appreciate the irony of that? So he was represented by the chief public defender, Tom Ullman, who was actually one of my professors in law school. And he was actually against the death penalty. He said not necessarily for moral reasons, but because it costs the state so much more money than putting people to jail for life. He said that he basically would get a blank check. He said if he had to fly to Indiana to talk to the guy's sister to get his, life history to come up with mitigating factors, he would do so. So, he said that it just cost the state so much money. He actually estimated that their trials with appeals cost the state $6 to $8 million each.
Wow. Each.
Both men cost the state $6 million to $8 million for their trials and appeals. Wow. So Hayes' trial lasted over 2 weeks. On October 5th, 2010, the jury convicted him of 16 of the 17 crimes for which he was charged, including all 6 capital offenses. Good. He was found not guilty on the arson charge. And the jury actually asked during deliberations, they sent out a note. I think it said something like, does the pouring of gasoline count for arson or something like that? So they were considering, they didn't believe that he lit the match, and that's why he was acquitted. Gotcha. So they think that Josh lit the match. So the penalty phase for Steven Hayes began on October 17th, 2010. And the jury sentenced him to death on November 8th, 2010, the 4th day of deliberations. And Steven Hayes smiled when they sentenced him to death. He was happy with the verdict and got what he wanted. Because remember, he's suicidal. He said that he didn't know the girls were alive when the fire was lit. And when he found out after the fact that they were still alive, that's when he started his suicide mission.
So he assumed that Joshua killed the girls.
Yeah. And
actually, he took care of them.
Yes. So there's varying stories even between Steven from when he confessed what he told his during a psych eval, what he told this podcast I listened to. But he in the podcast, he said that when he got back from the bank, Joshua said, kids are dead, Bill's dead, you got to take care of Jennifer.
Oh.
But
yeah.
I don't again, there's so many versions and they're so full of shit.
Yeah.
I don't know how it went down, but so I agree though that Joshua was the ringleader and that Steven got dragged into something that he probably wouldn't have done. I mean, he was he just
wanted money.
Yeah, he robbed cars. I mean, during the day.
Yeah.
Joshua, it seems to me he was really the mastermind behind this.
Yeah.
So Joshua's trial began about a year later, September 19th, 2011. He was charged with 3 counts of murder, 4 counts of kidnapping, and burglary, arson, and assault. Trial lasted a little over 3 weeks. On October 13th, 2011, a jury found him guilty on all 17 charges, including 6 capital felony charges. So a jury believed that he lit the match in his trial and not in Hayes. The sentencing phase of Komisarjevsky's trial began on October 25th, 2011. It lasted about 6 weeks, and on the 5th day of deliberation, the jury sentenced him to death. On April 12th, 2021, the Supreme Court rejected his appeal and affirmed his convictions, and the U.S. Supreme Court has declined to hear his appeal. Now, Hayes had appealed as well. There's automatic appeals, but he actually dropped it after the death penalty was abolished, and he was resentenced. So going into the death penalty, in 2009, so 2 years after this happened, the Connecticut legislature passed a bill to abolish the death penalty, and Governor Rell vetoed it, citing the Cheshire crimes, and she quoted a passage from Dr. Pettit in her veto letter. In 2012, Connecticut abolished the death penalty, and to get the votes needed to pass the repeal and allay some of the concerns from the fallout with the Cheshire killings, because Bill Pettit was like a monster advocate. I mean, like he was fully involved in all of this. The legislature abolished the death penalty going forward in 2012. So that would mean that the 11 inmates on death row would still be subject to capital punishment by lethal injection. On August 25th, 2015, the Connecticut Supreme Court, in the case of State versus Santiago, said that the abolition of the death penalty was retroactive and applied to those already on death row. So basically they said, you can't do what you did. If it's morally wrong, it's morally wrong. You can't kill the people that are already tagged. And that decision was affirmed by the Connecticut Supreme Court in the decision of State versus Peeler. And then after the death penalty was abolished, on July 23rd, 2017, Komisarjevsky was sentenced to 6 life terms plus 140 years. And Hayes was sentenced to 6 life terms and 106 years.
And that was 10 years to the day of the event. July 23rd, right?
Yes, it was. That was an excellent observation. That is crazy.
Numbers.
So I forgot to mention the two of these guys just pointed fingers at each other throughout their entire trial. So obviously they knew that they were guilty and they were going to be found guilty, but their attorneys, at least, Hayes wanted to die, but his public defender was still trying to put on a case against the death penalty. And Komisarjevsky had special public defenders because they had a conflict in the public defender's office because they were representing Hayes. So both of them were trying to point fingers. So Hayes tried to introduce in his trial journal entries that were written by Komisarjevsky. He was writing letters and was keeping a journal, and I guess he was sending the letters to this author that wrote a book. And, we talked about how he goes into people's houses and listens to them breathe. The stuff that he wrote is so disturbing. And these are quotes. They're not in any order necessarily. They're just from his journals that he wrote. He said, "A thief in the night, I have come to steal not jewels and money, but your personal safety, privacy, and security. I violate your inner asylum of intimacy, and I piss on your optical illusion of peace and innocence. I feast on your animosity. The Pettit family passed through their fear and into the calm waters of abject terror like mesmerized rabbits cornered by a spring predator. To see that fear, that emotional pain I feel every day manifested on another's face validates that this pain in me is real. Shockwaves of myself's hopelessness reverberates its bitterness through my crooked soul at the realization that I cross life's bridge of depravity. The awakening of my shadow repressed within reaching its zenith that morning with rapturous control of Michaela. Her age was insignificant."
Wow.
Yeah, he also wrote, month upon month, my private horror show went unnoticed at an impressionable age of childhood, innocence 6 years young. When other children were experiencing the world's magic and life's simple games, I was baptized in humanity's inhumanity.
So I don't like him.
No.
He's obviously a terrible human being and did terrible things. And it's like we said earlier, what a shame, because I can't even say this, but beautifully written.
I know.
Like
disturbingly beautifully written.
So if it were anything, like if he didn't do what he did and it wasn't on the topics that it is.
Right.
Unbelievable. Like, wow.
I agree with you. And this is going back to why I think he did it. Like, he was saying, I was faced with shocking realization that in some respects I enjoyed it. He said that Hayley Petit was a fighter and that she tried to break free and help her family. He called Petit a coward for not doing more for his wife and daughters. He said, had Mr. Petit fought back in the very beginning, I would have been forced to retreat.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. He said his passive disposition to the welfare of his family only confused and agitated the anger in me.
No, I think that's continued just
I think he's just trying to torture him.
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. He actually said to him, too, that he said that he gave Dr. Petit multiple times to to save his family, and that he was a coward and he ran when his life was in jeopardy.
Awful.
And I just think, again, with the amount of blood loss, I just think that's
how dare
absolutely
What chance did you give him? Like,
Yeah.
you woke him up with a baseball bat.
Yeah.
Right. Josh said, I am what I am and I make no excuses. I'm a criminal with a criminal's mind, and my anticipated death sentence will be a sentence of mercy. So, yeah. So Hayes was trying to put this in the light where, Komisarjevsky was the criminal mastermind behind this. And now in Komisarjevsky's trial, they had taken letters from Hayes where he apparently admitted to the murder of 17 other people.
Hayes did?
Yeah,
I don't
he
believe it.
wrote a letter. Well,
No.
hang on. He wrote a letter, and it said, he'd be responsible for 17 unsolved murders in New England between 1980s and 2007. And he was, detailing in these letters his first kill. I was driving home from a bar, and I noticed this girl hitchhiking. She'd be the perfect victim. It said the 17 kill trophies meant the most to me. Each trophy was a one of a kind and completely specific to each victim, which they were sneakers, according to this letter.
The sneakers.
It said, I've searched my whole life for someone who could embrace and had the capacity for evil as I possess. I thought I finally found it in Josh, but events show Josh, while he had the proper evil intent, lacked in the most serious aspects, commitment and control. So it's like, holy shit, this guy murdered 17 other people. And he's saying that he was the evil one or whatever.
No.
Well, he completely admitted to lying and fabricating that entire story, because he said that he figured that the police would come in and want to investigate all these murders that he was saying happened.
Oh.
So he would talk to them. He would give them information on these made up crimes in exchange for food. He was going to request oysters because he's highly allergic to oysters. So they'd bring him oysters, he would eat them, and then they would find him dead in his cell the next day.
I'm not going to lie. That's decently
It's
smart.
a decent plan.
That's like kind of,
it seems like it didn't work.
what do you have to lose?
It was a good plan.
Yeah.
If you like oysters, a good last meal.
So both of the guys are serving their sentences out in a prisons in Pennsylvania, actually. So in the aftermath of this, the Petit home was demolished on May 30th, 2008, and a memorial garden stands in its place. Dr. Petit created the Petit Family Foundation. It was created to honor the lives of the three women and support young people's education, particularly women's education in sciences, to improve the lives of those affected by chronic illness, and to support efforts to protect and help those affected by violence. They said after the home invasion, 25,000 pieces of mail came in, and the Petit family responded to every single one of them. And they said even if it didn't have a return address, they would look it up and they would find it. And they said that they would get things. They would get like a $5,000 check from like a big business, or they would get like crumpled up dollar bills because like that's all somebody had to give to the foundation. Wow. So it was like across the board. Yeah. Bill has started something called Michaela's Garden, where it's $10 for packets of seeds of flowers that were uprooted from the garden that Michaela helped her dad plant. Oh. And they've harvested over 300,000 seeds. Oh. On August 5th, 2012, Dr. Petit remarried Christine Pauliff, who's a freelance photographer who had volunteered to do work for the Petit Family Foundation. And I heard that she is very supportive. You know, she wants Bill to remember his wife and his family. You know, she said like it's sort of like a catch-22 for her because like she wants him to remember, but she also recognizes like had this horrible thing not happened, she would never have found the love of her life. But you know, she's very supportive of him and talking about the family. And they had a son, William Pettit III, on November 23rd, 2013. And in 2016, Dr. Pettit was elected as the state representative for the 22nd district. He assumed office in 2017 and is currently serving his 3rd term. And he said he used to have bad weeks and awful days, but he said these days it's mostly unpleasant minutes and hours.
There's something poetic about the fact that they had a son and not a daughter. You know, like that. There's just a memory of his. I
not
think that would have been
easier,
hard.
but
I
can't. I just can't imagine. I was interning in the victim's advocate's office when this was going down and when these cases were being tried. And I remember seeing him walking in the hallways and I just thought like, how do you even talk to him? And it's like, you know, you can't even be like, hey, how's your day? It's like, real shitty. My whole family was murdered. Like I can't even fathom like talking to him as a person. So that, guys, was the horrific Cheshire Home Invasion.
Was it insidious?
It was extremely, it was a grave retelling of an insidious murder.
It was a grave retelling. I will give you that. You were very grave.
It was a grave retelling.
Yeah.
What a way to kick us off on GRIMM, right?
I know. So I apologize for any disorganization, but it was a lot of information and
you did a great job.
Thank you.
Killed it.
Good.
Maybe better choice of words next time, but you did an awesome job.
So anyway, so that was the first episode. Again, thank you so much to our 3 listeners. We really appreciate your love and support. And yeah, so we just hope that you listen, learn, and
stay alive.